This video is about Creepy, Eerie, and Vampirella, magazine format comic book series published by Warren Publishing, which featured mostly painted covers about horror and science fiction. Presented are covers from each series separately and chronologically, all with cover art by Frank Frazetta from 1965 to 1983. As the covers go by, lots of fascinating information is presented, including information about Frank Frazetta and Warren Publishing. However, the information is not intended to correspond to the specific cover being shown. Frank Frazetta was an American fantasy and science fiction artist, noted for comic books, paperback book covers, paintings, posters, LP record album covers, and other media. He is often referred to as the Godfather of fantasy art and one of the most renowned illustrators of the 20th century. He lived from 1928 to 2010. He was born in Brooklyn, New York City, and was the only boy in a family of 3 sisters, and spent much time with his grandmother, who began encouraging him in art when he was 2 years old. At age 8, he attended Brooklyn Academy of Fine Arts. At age 16, in 1944, he began working in comics artist Bernard Bailey's studio doing pencil cleanups. After this, he did more work in the comic book industry. Later, he produced paintings for mass-market paperback editions of adventure books. His interpretation of Robert E. Howard's Conan the Barbarian visually redefined the genre of sword and sorcery and had an enormous influence on succeeding generations of artists. Frazetta's work in comics during this time were cover paintings and a few comic stories in black and white for the Warren Publishing horror and war magazines, Creepy, Eerie, Vampirella, and Blazing Combat. The 1983 animated epic dark fantasy adventure movie Fire and Ice was a collaboration between Ralph Bakshi and Frank Frazetta. In 2023, Frazetta's Dark Kingdom painting sold for $6 million, creating a new record for a Frazetta painting and for any fantasy art. Creepy, Eerie, and Vampirella, like the humor magazine Mad, were black and white magazines intended for newsstand distribution and did not submit their stories to the comic book industry's voluntary Comics Code Authority. Cover art featured many phenomenal artists. In the U.S. market, horror comics reached a peak in the late 1940s through the mid-1950s, when concern over content and the imposition of the self-censorship Comics Code Authority contributed to the demise of many titles and the toning down of others. After this, from the mid-1960s to the early 1980s, horror comics flourished as black and white horror comic magazines with color covers, which did not fall under the code. Warren Publishing was an American magazine company founded by James Warren, who started publishing in 1957. The magazine size versus traditional comic book size was done with the intention of avoiding the censorship of the Comics Code Authority. Initially based in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the company moved by 1965 to New York City. Warren Publishing's initial publications were the horror, fantasy, science fiction movie magazine Famous Monsters of Filmland and Monster World, both edited by Forrest J. Ackerman. Forrest J. Ackerman, who created or at least had a strong hand in creating Vampirella, lived from 1916 to 2008 and was an American magazine editor, science fiction writer and literary agent, a founder of science fiction fandom, and a leading expert on science fiction, horror, and fantasy films. He and Myrtle R. Douglas were the first people to wear costumes to a convention, to the 1939 First World Science Fiction Convention in New York, and can be considered to have started the cosplay phenomena. He was also an early member of what is today known as the Los Angeles Science Fantasy Society, the oldest continuously operating science fiction club in the world. Trina Robbins, who designed Vampirella's costume and hair, who lived from 1938 to 2024, was an American cartoonist, an early participant in the underground comic movement, and was an active member of science fiction fandom in the 1950s and the 1960s. Warren soon published Spaceman magazine and in 1960 Help magazine, with the first employee being Gloria Steinem. After introducing what he called Monsters Comics in Monster World, Warren expanded in 1964 with horror comic stories in the sister magazines Creepy and Eerie, selling for 35 cents as opposed to the standard comic book price of 12 cents. By publishing graphic stories in a magazine format to which the code did not apply, Warren paved the way for such later graphic story magazines as the American version of Heavy Metal, Marvel Comics Epic Illustrated, and Psycho and other series from Skywald Publications. An early editor was Archie Goodwin, who would become one of comics' foremost and influential writers, and he helped to establish Warren as a leader in its field. James Warren's bad health, combined with changing tastes and business problems, led to internal turmoil and editorial turnover, and Warren declared bankruptcy in 1983. In the near future, do you want to see a movie made based upon any of the characters in this video, such as Vampirella? If so, is there a specific actor that you want to have play that character? More videos like this one, short and longer, can be viewed at the Comic Excitement Convention Horror Playlist and Science Fiction Playlist. Please like, comment, subscribe, and click the notifications bell.